Of the Temple City Council for Thursday, July 6, 2017. Please rise as Sanjanet Crossley leads us in the invocation this evening, followed by our Pledge of Allegiance, which will be led by Kevin Beavers, Director of Parks and Recreation Services.
Heavenly Father, we thank you for this evening. We thank you for being alive the 7th month of the year. We thank you for just recently celebrating our independence and knowing the preciousness of being in a country where we are free to gather, free to express our opinions, free to serve in capacities like this particular governing body. We ask you to bless this evening, bless all those in attendance, and meet every need in our lives. It's the multifaceted areas of our lives. We ask you to bless our council people that give their time to us so liberally, their time without pay. We ask you to give them insight and wisdom in all the decisions they make on this evening and throughout the remainder of their term. We just thank you in advance for the returning of persons that are needed on this council like Ms. Morales. We just thank you for the new vision of the city. Now bless us in all the ways that you promised to do so. In your precious name we pray, amen.
Join me in the pledge. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you both. Now, I wasn't being mean earlier, but I just thought that if Judy was already sitting there, it'd be a little anticlimactic. And so the item 3 on the agenda is to administer the oath of office to Judy Morales, the elected council member for District 2. And Judy, if you will come up, and Lacey, if you'll meet them in the middle. Do you want the microphone here? Oh, sure.
Ready? Yeah. Okay. Raise your right hand. Repeat after me. Okay. I, Judy Morales, do solemnly swear.
I, Judy Morales, do solemnly swear.
That I will faithfully execute.
That I will faithfully execute.
The duties of the office of Councilmember District 2.
The duties
of the office.
Of the office of District 2.
Of the state of Texas.
Of the state of Texas.
And will to the best of my ability.
And will to the best of my ability.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
The Constitution and laws of the United States.
The Constitution, I'm nervous, I'm sorry. The Constitution and laws of the United States.
And of this state, so help me God.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I don't know.
Well, you've done this about 50 times.
But each time is very special. I want to thank everybody for being here. It's my honor and privilege to be able to serve our community, and just thank God and thank for each one of y'all.
Yeah,
ready to get to work now. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. We tried to keep the chair warm.
Yes.
And certainly glad to have you here and to serve again. And thank y'all for being here in the audience today. Sorry, I forgot my microphone went away, which is probably better for y'all out there. No, thank you very much. And wasn't this better than just sitting there and
yeah, that was
it was
fun.
kind of nice to walk up.
Made me more nervous though.
Now is the opportunity for public comments. Anyone wishing to speak on any matter may sign up to do so prior to this meeting. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. No discussion or action will be taken by the City Council. And I have Mr. Ryan Barker. Is that? And if you're welcome to speak now, but we will have a public hearing if you'd like to wait, or you can speak both times. It's whichever you would prefer. And Mr. Alan Lytle.
Thank you, Mayor, Councilman. Notice I set close so I can be here to hurry. There are 4 items on your consent agenda that I am concerned about. 2 of them are buying easements. 2 of them are giving away them for free. I know that our new this escape me. The planning and zoning departments are doing an excellent job of making sure that people don't build stuff inside our easements, and that these easements we're giving away are from old buildings that, we didn't have such great rules. But I want to be sure that perhaps the council should consider that from now on, when we find these kind of things, if there's fairly new construction, we sell the easements to the owners or let them tear down the things that are inside the easements. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Now we have a couple of proclamations. On number 4, we have Parks and Recreation Month. And Kevin Beavers, do you want to bring everybody up?
Yes, it's a small tobacco, but that'd be great to come up on that.
Well, I'm glad Judy's folks didn't leave.
Thought they were here for me.
Well, they are here for you. All right. Thank y'all. This is always a fun time of the year. Y'all had a wonderful event on 4th of July at Miller Park, Holly. The fireworks were fantastic, and again, y'all do such a wonderful job for the city. I think we continually get compliments about not only every department of the city, but always the Parks Department in particular. Whereas parks and recreation programs are an integral part of communities throughout this country, including the city of Temple, our parks and recreation are vitally important to establishing and maintaining the quality of life in our communities, ensuring the health of all citizens, and contributing to the economic and environmental well-being of the community and region. Whereas parks and recreation programs build healthy, active communities that aid in the prevention of chronic disease, provide therapeutic recreation services for those who are mentally or physically disabled, and also improve the mental and emotional health of all citizens. Whereas parks and recreation programs increase a community's economic prosperity through increased property values, expansion of the local tax base, increased tourism, the attraction and retention of businesses, and crime reduction. Whereas parks and recreation areas are fundamental to the environmental well-being of our community. Parks and natural recreation areas improve water quality, protect groundwater, prevent flooding, improve the quality of air we breathe, provide vegetative buffers to development, and produce habitat for wildlife. Whereas our parks and natural recreation areas ensure the ecological beauty of our community and provide a place for children and adults to connect with nature and recreate outdoors. And whereas the U.S. House of Representatives has designated July as Parks and Recreation Month, and the City of Temple recognizes the benefits derived from parks and recreation resources. Now therefore I, Daniel A. Dunn, Mayor of the City of Temple, Texas, do hereby proclaim the month of July 2017 as Parks and Recreation Month in the City of Temple, Texas, and I encourage all citizens to get out and enjoy our local parks and recreation areas within the City of Temple. In testimony whereof, I witness my hand and the seal of the City of Temple, Texas, this the 6th day of July 2017. And Kevin, I'm going to turn the mic over to you, and I know you'll want to say a few things, but I'd love to have everyone introduce themselves if they would.
Sure. Well, so, all the times that I get emails or phone calls from either the citizens or from the council, it's, they're always thinking me or Chuck or somebody. It's really not me. It's all the staff here, because we can't do it without you guys. And I will tell you, I tell you every year that I still think I would put this group against anybody in the state of Texas. They are top-notch. They're dedicated. That's why you see a lot of tenured staff up here. We try to make it a great, fun place to be, but we also, it has turned into a business if you look at the number of programs we do. I mean, when they go around, introduce what they do, it's amazing all the areas that we touch everybody's lives here. So anyway, I do thank you for reading the proclamation, and I'll start down here, Mr. Ward.
Jeff Ward, Director of Golf.
Nancy Glover, Convention and Visitors Bureau Manager.
Donna Dixon, Administrative Assistant.
Derek Newman, Wellness Coordinator.
Holly Lieferman, Special Events Coordinator.
Linda Yang, Wilson Coordinator.
Richard Fibish, Recreation Superintendent.
Sherry Street, Downtown Development Coordinator.
Chuck Graham, Assistant Director.
Rex Caldwell, Maintenance Foreman.
Belinda Garcia, Program Coordinator for the Gober Party House.
Tracy Klusacek, Athletic Coordinator.
Keith Dawson, Aquatics Coordinator.
So, Mayor, that's just a small, we couldn't fit everybody in here that's in the department, but this is the pretty much, probably 95%, not all of them could be here, but this is the core group that's in charge of overseeing staff, that's running, the summer program, the lifeguards, and that's a chore in itself this time of the year. But in your seat when you arrive, you should have found a backpack. In there will be a schedule of different activities going on during this month, like popsicles in the park. There's like some specials at Salmon's Golf Course. So there's different things you can look at to do, but I think there's other things you can do. Anyway, take advantage of that, but appreciate it once again, and thanks to the staff for a great job they do day in, day out. Oh, hold on before you clap. Jonathan, he's always the silent one in the corner. He's taking our picture. He's our marketing coordinator, also our public information officer. So sometimes I do overlook him, but another person that does just a great job for us.
Kevin, let me ask you a quick question. And this has don't worry, it has nothing to do. No, it's.
I looked it up before I came.
Yeah, no, that's actually that's funny, but that wasn't the question I was going to ask you. A couple of weekends ago, had the biggest turnout, I think, at a reopening of a city area in Salmon's Community Center, and I'm guessing there were 250, 300 people there.
I think they had a count, it was like 325.
Yeah, and hugely supported by the community, and everybody was going through the community center with big smiles on their faces and just saying what an incredible facility it is, thanks to our citizens who voted for the 2015 bond election. And everybody was so complimentary about the staff, everybody there. And then there was this one gentleman who came up to me, and he looked at me and he said, "There's only one bike." and I said, "Well," I said, I'm sorry that this has been so disappointing for you, but everybody else, the other 324 people, were incredibly pleased with the center, and y'all should be commended for that as well. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Item 4B, if we could recognize the sponsors of the Bloom & Temple Festival. And Kevin, I think you've got this one too.
I've got this one, but I would like Holly, which you just met her, special event coordinator, also come up. When we do our volunteer banquet, or I've been up here before, I tell you how critical our volunteers are, the citizens, but also tonight we get a special honor to recognize some of our local businesses that we can't do things that we do without them. And Danny, I was going to accuse you of this first one, because we're going to recognize Mac Hike. They sponsored our main stage, and also they provided the vehicles to help drive the entertainers around. And the person that was supposed to come was easy, Jason Scott, but he could not be here. So when they told me you have to say Sean LeCheminot, I said, can you write that out so I know how to say that? That could be very bad. So anyway, Mac Hike has been there with us the last 2 years since the city took over the festival and ran it solely ours. So I would like Sean to come up real fast, if you don't mind. Can I get the mic also, Daniel?
Of course you can.
Thank you. And as you come up, the sponsors, I'll let you, you don't have to say anything, but you're welcome to say anything, so that's why I grabbed the mic. Great.
Just want to thank you, Mayor, council members, everybody involved, especially Holly. You guys worked very hard, and we really appreciate the opportunity to be a part.
Thank you, sir. And Kevin, one more time, I didn't quite catch his name. Would you say that one more time?
His name's Sean.
Okay. Thanks so much.
I will tell you also, the numbers we had this year, the adults that came through, remember we got rained out on one of the evenings, but we had 7,348 adults and then 3,020 children, that was 12 and under, to come during that time period. So it's a great event for the community, and they do help make it possible. The next sponsor I'd like to have come up is Rich Levin. He is with CEPCO. He's the Vice President of Marketing. They've been with us the last 2 years, and once again, cannot make this happen without a great sponsorship like CEPCO.
Mr. Mayor and Council, just happy and proud to be a part of the community, and happy to be a sponsor of this event, and just want to thank everyone and thank all the park people and everyone who came out to the event.
Thank you so much.
And Mayor and Council, the last sponsor is definitely a familiar name, HEB. They not only help us with the Blue Man Festival, but there's a lot of other events that they're very supportive of this community and our department. But I'd like Chris Zier to come up. They were the presenting sponsor once again this year. Could not do it once again without HEB. Chris, thank you.
Just want to thank everybody for allowing us to be involved. So I'm actually new to the area. I've been here maybe about 5 months, but definitely look forward to being involved a lot more in the community, seeing everybody in our store hopefully as well. But anything we can help out with for sure, we'd definitely like to be involved however possible. And thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Thank you. If we get one more round of applause for all three of our present. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. All items listed under this section are considered to be routine by the City Council and may be enacted by one motion. If discussion is desired by the council, any item may be removed from the consent agenda at the request of any council member and will be considered separately. Council, this is items 5A through 5P. Are there any items that you wish to remove for separate consideration or discussion? There being none, I will entertain a motion on item 5.
Make a motion for approval.
Second. Motion to second, Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Long?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Davis?
Aye.
Councilmember Pilkington?
Aye.
Councilmember Morales?
Aye.
Mayor Dunn?
Aye. Item 6, second reading and a public hearing. Consider adopting an ordinance authorizing amendments to the City of Temple's Unified Development Code, Article 6, Section 6.7, related to the Interstate 35 Corridor Overlay Zoning District to amend the boundary description, applicability, uses allowed, and the development standards, including landscaping, architecture, and signage. Mr. Chandler.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Just want to give you a brief background as to why we're here and why we're proposing code amendments 8 years after the adoption of the I-35 corridor overlay. Part of it's just to provide some additional clarity, but also to provide some design flexibility, especially for smaller sites and existing buildings, but also providing additional land use opportunities through a conditional use permit to match market demand. We've had multiple conversations with council at various workshops on this topic, and through a CUP process, it does give P&Z and council an opportunity to consider those uses on a case-by-case basis to determine the appropriateness for that specific location. But it also, rather than having it just prohibited, the use prohibited in our standards, gives other businesses an opportunity to look through our code and say, okay, look, at this location, there's a defined process as opposed to it's just not allowed, which can encourage economic development within the corridor. So you've seen this table a few times. Maybe it's been updated since the last time, but essentially this is all of the appeal projects since the adoption of the code, and you can see at the top the different standards that were appealed. And the bottom line is, there have been 25 different appeal cases in the history of the overlay, and the most frequently appealed standards are related to landscaping, followed by signage and architecture. So last time we talked was at the City Council retreat in February, and just wanted to give you, one slide just to summarize kind of the major differences between what you saw then and what you'll see tonight. And a lot of that really involves input from a variety of different stakeholders that we've met with since then, including the design community and brokers and property owners. And so major changes include a plan for a phase 2 of amendments that would comprehensively address the boundary. That's a bigger question that warrants additional discussion and meeting with property owners, all the property owners and stakeholders, but also the uses related to industrial and the retail sub-districts, to defer those discussions to that phase 2, in addition to the buffering and screening requirements that are also related to uses. And then the second one is allowing aluminum composite material, sometimes called ACM, for sign bases. So I'll get into the weeds a little bit later to show you exactly what we're talking about. But before we get into that, just a reminder about the map. This shows the the 4 different sub-districts, everything from the Civic District, which is essentially the Mayborn Convention Center and the Cultural Activities Center. You can see a small little blue area, and basically includes 4 different properties, at third one being a church and a privately owned vacant piece of property. And so we propose renaming 3 of the districts, calling Civic District Convention, just to provide a little bit more clarification of what's the purpose of that district. Industrial District, keep that name. It's pretty self-explanatory, but that's shown here in purple. It's kind of the northern edges of the community. Freeway Retail and / Commercial District, which is shown here in red. Just renaming that retail, just make it simple and clear. And then lastly, the City Entry District, which you see these 5 different locations that are major intersections, such as at the Outer Loop and Loop 363 and I-35, and then Adams. And really just to clarify, these are about gateways, and to rename those district the Gateway District as well. All right, in terms of process, the code, there's a lengthy section in there about process, and it includes 5 different steps right now that we are, quite frankly, obligated to do, and really the practice does not meet the code, because these 5 steps that you see on the screen, design orientation, conceptual, preliminary, construction documents, and permitting, it's labor intensive. The applicants, it's not to their benefit, it's not to staff's benefit, and so we're proposing to consolidate these 5 into 3 steps, and also not requiring hard copies, 2 paper versions for each step. Electronic submittals are very common. We prefer that. The applicant usually prefers that, so we want to keep that flexibility to allow that. So essentially just consolidating into design orientation, preliminary design, and the permitting stages, and that meets the needs of the applicant and staff to be able to have a discussion about a concept early on, give feedback about the code, have them design according to that concept, and then submit for permitting. All right, so the section, you've seen this table a time or two. This is the applicability table, And basically what this table determines is which of the standards are triggered based on a certain scope of project. And so if you look here at the bottom, this area that I've highlighted, an increase in gross floor area of 10 to 24%, or modifications with a cost equal to 10 to 24% of the assessed value of improvements per the current tax roll. So bottom line is it treats expansion of a building versus just a renovation, no expansion, the same in the code. And that level of threshold of a 10 to 24% investment would trigger our landscaping requirements, which, as you all may recall, that landscaping requirements in I-35 are fairly significant. Includes a 25-foot landscape buffer in the front, 10-foot landscape buffers in the side and rear, landscape parking islands, all irrigated, underground irrigation, and an overall 15% site landscaping, which the buffers are counted towards that. So one of the purposes of the code amendments is that I'll show you some alternative tables in a second, but is to clarify also that these the triggers only apply to exterior work and not interior, because right now it reads just modifications, doesn't say whether it's interior modifications or exterior. And then also just have a little more proportional triggers. You know, for example, and this is one that I've used before, but it's very telling that if we as staff were to interpret a $5,000 bathroom and a $50,000 building per the tax rolls, and that condition does exist along I-35, that technically that modification could trigger all the landscaping that I mentioned before. So a $5,000 investment at permitting could result in a $15,000 probably minimum cost related to landscaping. And so we just want to break some of those triggers out into a more proportionate level of investment. And so we break it into two different tables. This is the proposed architecture table. And essentially one of the points as well is to exempt ordinary repair and maintenance. A new roof, for example, that's essential for the building and not an improvement per se. It's ordinary repair and maintenance, but it's necessary. So exempt that from the triggers. And then break out the different architectural requirements, such as building materials, providing the masonry. There's a primary entrance requirement, which I'll show you what that looks like in a second. And then architectural elements every 50 feet. So break those into different categories and triggers for each of those categories based on more proportional scope of, for example, expansion of a building would trigger more of the requirements than just an exterior facelift. So providing that additional flexibility and once again the proportional triggers. All right, the landscaping table would look like this. And once again, intended to be a little bit more flexible, proportional triggers. Now with the landscaping requirements, such as, if you look at the top here, the front landscape buffer, and then the side landscape buffer requirements, parking islands and with trees, front foundation plantings. These are all improvements that take footprint for the site. As opposed to the architectural elements, which can be done just to the existing footprint of the building. This all, on smaller sites, is often not implementable or feasible with our current standards. So the idea is to have options, starting with the front landscape buffer, so that if you have just a renovation with a cost equal to 10 to 24%, you don't have a front landscape buffer, you add one. And then going down the list as the project gets bigger in scope, then you have to add side landscape buffers, then getting to parking islands with trees, then foundation plantings, so on and so forth. But these are primarily benefiting the existing buildings and smaller sites, which is mostly what we find along the corridor, in which our code currently does not adequately address. And so Lastly, what you see in blue are two other options that are not currently in the code, and one of them is curbing and landscaping of parking lot dead space, essentially especially for those small sites where all they have room for is building, parking spaces and driveways, which we see a number of those on the smaller lots. There are other options. If you can't meet 1 through 4, then you take areas where cars are not going to travel and landscape those. And then lastly, right-of-way landscaping is another option that they can work with staff on. All right, in terms of the landscaping buffer widths, as I mentioned, right now the code requires a 25-foot front landscape buffer. And I use the Mattress Firm example in Bird Creek Crossing. You'll recognize that landscape plan to the right. This was actually the first appeal that I worked on 3.5 years ago. But bottom line is this is part of the Bird Creek Crossing development, has significant landscaping. Actually, the overall landscaping exceeds our minimum overall requirements, which are 15%. They provided 25%. But because it's a small site, they couldn't provide the landscape buffers because it's all driveway and parking. They have landscape buffers. They just didn't meet the 25-foot on the front, 10 on the sides. And so that's just an example to show that a more proportional landscape buffer width based on the size of the site is recommended. Everything from a 5-foot front landscape buffer and 5 foot on the sides for smaller sites, and then all the way up to 25 feet for the larger sites. All right, I mentioned the parking lot dead space, landscaping that. This is an example of how that was done. This is actually on South 31st Street, not I-35, but it's an example in which they took unusable space on the lot and added landscaping. And here's a side landscape flower bed that they provided that really serves as a nice buffer between the churches and the gas station. All right, so summary of the other landscaping amendments. Once again, focusing on existing building renovations because new construction, all the standards apply. So the tables that we looked at are for existing building renovations and not requiring underground irrigation for existing buildings when they're renovated. Presumably existing buildings have usually good condition parking lots. Property owners tend to not like to tear up good parking lots to add irrigation lines, not to mention the fact that we already have requirements in our code, general standards that require property owners to replace dead landscaping. So just make sure that they have a hose bib within 200 feet and they're still responsible for maintaining it. It's up to the property owner how that's maintained. Also allowing up to a third of required landscaping to consist of a variety of types of rock or mulch. All right, so if we look at the architectural requirements, starting with the masonry requirement, what does that look like? And then option 2, which is a little less obvious, of the entryway requirement and what's proposed. Because as mentioned, all new construction would have to meet, all 3 of the options: the masonry, the entryway, and the architectural elements. But you can see in BJ's restaurant, which actually predates the overlay, but it meets the intent of providing the variety of masonry materials, and then a minimum of a 4-foot offset entry. So it either juts out from the rest of the building or it kind of cuts in. But we'll show you another option that's proposed to be able to meet that requirement that doesn't require adding on to the building. And then the third element within the table, these are existing requirements related to architectural elements that, essentially every 50 feet, except in the industrial subdistrict where it's 100 feet, for warehouses and such, one of the elements shown below in white has to be provided by code currently, and that's related to exterior window treatments and arches and columns, that sort of thing. And so we're just proposing that we expand that list to other architectural elements such as porches, 3-foot deep roof overhangs, peaked roof forms, integrated planters, accent materials. And so if you look in the top right-hand corner, this is the clubhouse for Villas on the Hill and in TMed, but this is just an example of what basically if you threw all of those elements onto one building, that's essentially what you get. We're not proposing that. It's but it identifies kind of what those elements look like. Summary of other architectural elements: the 4-foot entryway. As I mentioned before, currently in the code, it has to be either an offset, either interior to the building or popping out. We're proposing that you can meet that requirement by adding a metal canopy or awning and storefront windows, combined with some kind of vertical architectural element, a parapet, for example. And so once again, just look at some existing buildings as to what those look like. Here, Five Guys and Chipotle, it meets that standard. It's kind of an industry standard, but to provide that as an option without having to add on to the building to meet that entryway requirement. You can attach architectural elements. Sidewalks. Sidewalks are not required throughout the district. They're only required on any city entry sub-district street or any street intersecting with I-35 if it's on the Trails Master Plan, which I think there are only 2 locations that meet that. So one thing that we are proposing that is actually a stricter element in the code is ensuring pedestrian connectivity through a larger shopping center, such as Bird Creek Crossing. And when I say larger, I mean it would really, it applies to median islands, which you see here by this yellow arrow, that the various types of parking islands that are required now. A median island, essentially, if you've got a large big box retailer, every 4th parking island strip would have to be a median island. And so to add a sidewalk there, much like you see at the Arbor Trails development to the right, this is in Austin, just to make sure that you can get from your car, to the store that you're walking to safely on a sidewalk on the large big box retailers. And then also ensuring that in these big box retailers and with the pad sites, so these shopping centers, that there are sidewalks that connect the big box stores to the pad sites, much like Arbor Trails shown to the right. All right, signage. Our signage height is limited to 25 feet for freestanding signs, or pylon signs as they're sometimes called. And you look at the Starbucks sign to your right, that essentially is what meets our code to the T in terms of height and the masonry base requirements and those ratios. But related to the height, we're proposing not a major change, but to allow up to an additional 10 feet for 1 foot for every foot of setback from the property line to be able to get the 35-foot height that we've seen a lot of the appeals request. And then also related to travel-related uses, restaurants, hotels. Right now we allow a 40-foot tall sign for those. So essentially making all of those, a level playing field. So the 25-foot to 35-foot tall height for those as well. And from a legal perspective, Kayla can probably appreciate this is not this is a content neutral code amendment. So we're making sure that we don't treat one type of business differently than another. All right, other amendments clarifying that each driveway is allowed a freestanding sign. Right now, freestanding sign numbers are based on the length of your business frontage. So let's base it on where you really need them, and that's at various driveways. Also, providing an additional option to the masonry base requirements. You know, I showed you the Starbucks sign, which meets the masonry base requirements, which is, you know, just basically a 6-to-1 ratio of height to width right now. So, you know, a tall kind of pillar of masonry. Well, providing an option of a two-legged sign clad in brick or stone, similar to this Bird Creek Crossing sign. Once again, Bird Creek Crossing, just using that as an example. And then lastly, on this slide at least, that existing pole signs, which are prohibited, but we have throughout the corridor, these would be considered non-conforming signs, and they can remain legally, just change out sign faces, and that's what we see right now. But in order, you know, in order to try to make those signs compliant in the overlay and improve the look, add a masonry requirement so they can keep that sign, but add some masonry, just like this sew and quilt store example. Once again, that's a TMed example, but that was a solution to allow that in TMed. A couple other sign code amendments. Banners and roof signs are currently prohibited, and we've had at least a roof sign example recently that came forward as an appeal. Banners, they're just not allowed, and certainly there's a need for them, or at least a desire, and so we'd propose allow those on a limited basis, requiring a permit for special occasions such as grand openings, and you know, but not allowing them to a point to where they could, you know, result in kind of sign clutter. And then allowing, as I mentioned before, the aluminum composite material for freestanding signs to match buildings that utilize that material. And the Garland Shelton Nissan, this is a proposed sign for their new location there at Midway. You may know they're moving, but you can see what that looks like. It's a high quality material, tends to be more expensive than masonry as well. Lighting, we have a 80,000 lumens per acre limitation right now per site. And raise your hand if you can look at a site and know whether it's 80,000 lumens per acre. Okay, I should have, I was about to raise my hand, but I couldn't do that either. So point being, that's a requirement that it's also difficult to not only recognize, but to enforce as a result. And it's apparently, it's also below the industry standard for a lot of these uses, so that is also a frequently appealed standard. So if we just focus on the form, you know, such as this graphic to the right, full cutoff light fixtures to prevent light trespass outside the boundaries, also to prevent light trespass from going up. So, hey, if they need the additional light, such as at a car dealership, as long as they're not creating issues for neighbors or drivers, can't see the bulb, then go for it. Also removing the limitation on hours of lighting. This is also something that has not been enforced, and quite frankly, we don't know why it's in there. Signage, making sure that signage can be internally or externally illuminated. So if you've got say a wood sign that would have external lamps, that would be prohibited right now. It would have to be lighting inside of a cabinet, for instance, and there are examples to where that is aesthetically even better looking, so provide that as an option. All right, land uses. We've had discussions about land uses and the fact that most of the inquiries that we've received in the last several years for new businesses have actually been uses that are either prohibited in a lot of cases or in some cases require a conditional use permit. And so as part of that, you know, we look at what's the risk of if your code requires this and the market is here. Of course, we've got a little construction project going on I-35 that will change some of that when that's done in a couple years. But you run the risk of extended vacancies and increased code enforcement issues, and we have seen that in our office. And so we wanted to take a stab at addressing some of that. Starting with the convention subdistrict, and as I mentioned, the convention subdistrict includes the Mayborn, and the Cultural Activities Center, but it also includes Grace Community Primitive Baptist Church, and then a vacant piece of property that you see here along West Bel Air North and North 3rd Street. However, the current code pretty much prohibits anything that's a revenue-producing use. And so adding some basic revenue-producing uses that could complement the Mayborn and the Cultural Activities Center, such as apartments. You know, they're on the undeveloped piece of property, you know, that could be desirable at some point. Child care facility, especially for the church. You know, that's a prohibited use right now within that sub-district. Hotel, that's really the big one. Convention center and a hotel, that may be desirable someday, and I know that question has been analyzed over the years. Clarifying that that wireless towers, cell phone towers, we prohibited that in the overlay with a few exceptions probably about 1.5 years ago, but just making sure that it's reflected in the table. A restaurant, once again, complementing the convention services and the CAC, but not a drive-in or drive-through, sit-down restaurants, so that it complements the uses there. And then retail shop, gift shop, which, the CAC may want one of those someday in the future. Stakeholder input, I'm not going to go through all of this, but basically, as I mentioned, met with different brokers who represent property owners along I-35 and other design professionals that have represented projects on I-35, as well as groups like the Chamber of Commerce, the Cultural Activities Center, and TEDC in the reinvestment zone, and also met with the Temple Area Builders Association. But essentially, this is a long list of recommended revisions that were incorporated into the draft code. And the reinvestment zone, they provided some feedback about, concern of uses in the retail and industrial subdistricts, and others have brought up that concern as well. And so, as I mentioned in one earlier slide, that's one of the revisions to what you're seeing today, what's proposed for Phase 1 versus what would be addressed in Phase 2 is to not address the land use questions in the retail and industrial subdistricts. For example, that corridor south of Nugent in front of the high school, that is in the retail subdistrict, as is the Motor Mile, at the southern end of town. And so they're maybe treating those differently, but evaluating whether those boundaries ought to change, or maybe even an additional district perhaps could be added. All right, so at the May 15th meeting, the Planning and Zoning Commission unanimously recommended approval per the staff recommendation, which included at that time amendments related to uses in the industrial subdistrict. Then after additional analysis and stakeholder input, staff is recommending deferring the use amendments in the industrial subdistrict to Phase 2, along with the retail subdistrict. And so just comprehensively, it seems to make sense for those to go together. So staff recommends approval as previously presented with the following changes. Defer the amendments related to the uses in the retail and industrial subdistricts to Phase 2. Approve amendments related to uses within the convention and gateway subdistricts, and defer the buffering and screening requirements for different uses to Phase 2 as well. And so if you look at the uses in the convention district, we talked about that already, but the gateway district, everything that you see in green would be an amendment to allow by right, assuming that the base zoning already allows it, such as a child care facility, and that'd be consistent with the other comparable districts in the corridor. But then what you see in red would be to prohibit, because what we see here are a bunch of uses that if the base zoning district allows it, such as heavy industrial, believe it or not, we have some in heavy industrial property within our gateway districts, and a sexually oriented business could be located there. And so that is an example: shooting range, outdoor, stable, upholstery shop, veterinary hospital with kennels, wreckage or salvage yard, just to say the uses at those key intersections may not be appropriate. So, next steps, the phase 2 of the amendments that I'd mentioned before to further evaluate the boundary description, clarifying what's in, clearly map, look at the boundaries. We have an issue right now with the way it's written. It's kind of it's based on ownership and changing, factors. And so if we want to evaluate that, and because there's confusion about what's in, and what's in today may not be what's in a year from now. So we really want to comprehensively evaluate that and work with the affected stakeholders, because the effectiveness of the code really also depends on not only property owners understanding that they're in, but understanding those codes and making decisions based on what those codes allow or don't allow. Also discussing overhead utility burial requirements. We're not proposing to change those right now, but we need to take a closer look at them. And address permitted uses in the retail and industrial subdistricts, as I mentioned, and of course these would all come back to P&Z and council. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Brian, out of your 3.5 years with the City of Temple, how long have you been working on this?
Oh, gosh, probably 3.
That's good. That's like good TxDOT timing. Really.
Yes.
Anyway, thank you very much for this. And Councilor, are there any questions on this? Right, at this time.
I want to echo the mayor's comments. Some of those overlays have been laborious not really for us, for you. And so I appreciate the work and listening to the community on making those changes that I think ultimately will be better for Temple. So I know it's a lot of work, and it's easier just to leave something in place. And I appreciate your thoroughness in helping us make this overlay better. Good work.
Thank you.
I echo that.
I'd like to add that 14 years ago, I was on planning and zoning, and we took a stab at overlay, and it didn't even, there's no relationship. We might as well have been from Mars, and this is great. You've really done wonderful, wonderful work.
There was a good framework to work with, so that really helped.
It wasn't from us.
Did you mess it up?
Probably, undoubtedly.
This time I'll open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak on this matter may do so. Please step to the podium and state your name and address for the record. Right, there being no one wishing to speak, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Council, your pleasure on the second reading of item 6?
Motion to approve item 6.
I second that motion.
Motion and a second, Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Long?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Davis?
Aye.
Councilmember Pilkington?
Aye.
Councilmember Morales?
Aye.
Mayor Dunn?
Aye. Brian, again, thank you.
Mayor, it is.
Thank you.
Second reading, I just want to clarify, second reading because we did table it last meeting.
and-
So there will be one final reading that will be required without a public hearing for final
Perfect.
approval.
Thanks.
Presentation will be available if you'd like to see it again.
I'm good. I'm good, actually.
And I remember
I
all
can't
those.
speak for everybody. I have committed it to memory, so. Item 7, second reading and a public hearing. Considering adopting an ordinance authorizing a rezoning from single-family 1 zoning district to planned development general retail zoning district on 27.876 acres located on the southeast corner of South 5th Street and Loop 363. The PD would incorporate certain development and frontage standards from the Temple Medical and Educational Zoning District, allow approval of site development plans and phases, and allow multiple family dwellings and mini storage warehouses only as approved by site development plan. Mr. Chandler.
All right, thank you, Mayor and Council. And this case had gone to P&Z on May 15th, and of course, the first reading was on the June 15th, and then the public hearing is actually tonight. And I have an abbreviated presentation for this one. However, I know the the applicant and property owner are here, and I think that they wanted to make some comments at the podium as well, but I do have all the slides available if you need it. Basically, the site development plan, as shown on the screen that we discussed 3 weeks ago, is primarily for a rehabilitation hospital at the proposed extension of South First Street, south of Loop 363, at that intersection, and then, of course, other phases of development within this 27-plus acres would require future amendments with site plans. But you see what the a reminder of what that hospital would look like, and then the bottom right-hand corner showing an example of a typical mini storage that would be allowed according to what was requested with the various design standards. And so I'm just going to kind of walk you through the evolution of a recommendation and and action, starting with the P&Z recommendation. At their May 15th meeting, P&Z recommended unanimous approval per staff recommendation, which included all 13 development standards and conditions, including allowing mini storage in that easternmost portion. And then at Council, so between P&Z and Council, based on feedback from Reinvestment Zone Project Group, where primary stakeholders who have helped fund the master plan, helped fund the extension of South First Street, their input was of great concern about mini storage use at that location, and so staff agreed that the mini storage use at this time at that location would not be consistent with the TMed South Master Plan, and therefore recommended removal of that condition from the original 13. And at your June 15th meeting, by a 3-to-1 vote, you all voted to approve per staff revised recommendation, so all the conditions except for that mini storage. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Handler, any questions at this time? All right. At this time, I'll open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak on this matter may do so. Please step to the podium and state your name and address for the record.
Hello, my name is Ryan Barker, address 6692 Canterbury Court in Highland, Utah, and appreciate being here with you today. And just thought I'd make a few comments about this project. We are genuinely pleased and so happy for the progress we've made in getting this project to this point, and it's, I would say, been very much an effort of a tremendous city staff behind getting this done. And I appreciate the mayor and Jonathan Graham was very helpful in this, the TEDC. Brian Chandler has worked with us so much, and then we also had the privilege of having the reinvestment zone step in. And it's been I would say one of our first projects that we've had so many different moving parts, and it's a community we've actually decided to do a lot more in as a result of this experience. And we have 3 other projects that are either under contract or in the pipeline right now that we're pursuing here in your community. So we appreciate that. Just wanted to make one comment as far as our decision to remove the storage from this project. We've been so focused and excited about the hospital and the real core of this project that we overlooked advising all of the stakeholders as to the purpose of that small mini storage proposal there. And so what we've decided to do is take it off and table it for the time being. I have had the chance to speak with a few members of the reinvestment zone and explain a little bit about our strategy behind that. That really, at the end of the day, it came at the recommendation of an assisted living group we were trying to sell this land to, who said, if there was a buffer here and a screen to this railroad, perhaps we could buy and develop on this site. And out of that conversation came an idea to do that storage primarily as a screened use at that time. But like I said, we feel like it's appropriate to put that on the back burners because we're very excited about the core of this project and keeping this going. And we'll have the opportunity to sit down with the reinvestment zone, TEDC, and the various stakeholders to make sure everybody weighs in and we do the right thing there. So just wanted to pass that on. Are there any questions that I could answer outside of that would be appropriate at this time?
No, sir, and I appreciate your willingness to work and listen to those people. And the fact that you do have the opportunity once this is developed out to come back and if that is the highest and best use at that time, that we can determine that. And just thank you for your patience.
Okay, thank you.
Just out of curiosity, assuming everything continues to go smoothly, how long until that hospital's up and running?
We expect that they will be breaking ground probably later this year.
Probably
December. And what is it, an 18-month construction schedule? So, yeah, we're probably 2 years out until that's going. But Evers Hospital has been a tremendous group to work with, and we're excited to have them as kind of the flagship for this project. I think it'll set a tone for many other good things to come.
Thank you. And I would just like to say that we've used the term stakeholder a lot. I think you as a developer should probably be listed as a major stakeholder in this property too. So, and so, granted, you had to pay for your opinions, not the other way around. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is Alan Lytle. I live at 504B Paseo del Plata here in Temple. And Mayor and Councilman, I'm happy to come speak with you. I'm going to shock the mayor because I'm actually going to agree with him and with the young man who just left that the railroad obviously causes a major problem with building any occupied structures because of the noise and the OSHA requirements. So a mini storage would actually be a very good thing, especially one that looks as pretty as this one does. Now, the reason though I'm really here is because of the project. I'm all for the project. I'm simply concerned that now, with the construction going on 5th Street, 1st Street, and the Loop, that the construction traffic that this will generate, large trucks, cement trucks, large equipment, will have to be directed to 5th Street, which is a very well-traveled street now because of the construction, and there is no actual entrance currently from this property to anything but 5th Street or the now very narrow area of the Loop. And the potential for accidents, including possible fatal accidents, it seems to me to be that we need to consider delaying actual construction until the 1st Street project and the Loop project are complete. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I don't want to get used to you agreeing with me, so. Anyone else? All right. That being the case, I will declare the public hearing closed. I'm surprised that there were no other stakeholders here to speak during public hearing. I just kind of want to make one comment on that, and I promise I'll be good. A few years ago, the city actually used money that was taken out of the reinvestment zone to close down or make quiet zones in downtown Temple because it was realized that train noise is sometimes a detriment to retail development. I voted against it because I like trains and we're a train town. Then we've updated the TMED plan, so the plans have been fluid and have changed. As you see, we just updated the I-35 corridor plan, so we have changed that. we are about to have something that involves Crossroads Park, that part of Crossroads Park, humorously enough, was originally the Bioscience Park that ended up now being, tennis courts and everything else. So sometimes visionaries can't see the forest for the trees. And so I appreciate your willingness to work with us, and we'll see what happens. But I would entertain a motion on the second reading of item 7.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we accept ZFY 1721 as read.
Second.
A motion and a second. Madam Secretary.
Just to clarify, you are making the same motion as approved
Yes.
on first reading?
Yes.
Okay.
Councilmember Long?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Davis?
Aye.
Councilmember Pilkington?
Aye.
Councilmember Morales?
Aye.
Mayor Dunn?
Aye. 8, first reading and a public hearing, consider adopting an ordinance authorizing an amendment to the tax increment financing reinvestment zone number 1, financing and project plans to appropriate additional funding for Crossroads Park at Pepper Creek Trail in FY 2017.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. This item is adding an additional funding of $750,000 for the construction of Crossroads Park. As of to date, the reinvestment zone is committed or appropriated it within their financing plan a little over $5.5 million for that project, and that includes Phase 1 and Phase 2. And the additional funding was moving from a line item where we're deferring some intersection enhancements on 31st Street. It was determined to have completed 2 phases. The third phase, with all the construction and traffic routing, thought it would be better to defer those to the future. And the reinvestment zone approved this amendment at their June 28th, 2017 board meeting.
Council, any questions? At this time, I'll open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak on this matter may do so. Please step to the podium and state your name and address for the record. No one wishing to speak, I will declare the public hearing closed. Council, your pleasure on the first reading of item 8.
Mayor, I make a motion that we accept the first reading of item 8 as presented by the Finance Department.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Long?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Davis?
Aye.
Councilmember Pilkington?